French have a method of thickening their soups and their sauces with something that we like to call roux, R-O-U-X. When people first see that word, they don't know what to think. So let me show you how to make it so you're not so afraid of it. First off, we're going to make our roux in a hot pan. So we turn our heat up on our pan and we melt our butter. And the reason we melt the butter is we want it to get to what we call a beurre noisette, which means that the butter, as it's melting, will cook out the water that's left in there. The water that's left in there basically just waters it down, doesn't add a lot of flavor to it, it's just kind of a filler. So we want to make sure that that water is gone so that we have the pure product. So with our butter, we'll scoot it around the pan here. I like to use softened butter because with softened butter it will melt a lot quicker, but it'll still kind of hold its form. Now if you have frozen butter and you want it to melt really quick, just cut it into smaller pieces so that it melts faster. And you'll notice that when the butter starts to heat up, it'll kind of start to spatter a little bit. It'll kind of start to you'll see that it'll start to sizzle. That's the water evaporating out of it. And that's okay. You want that to happen. Because with a beurre noisette, you want to be able to smell it. You want it to kind of smell a little bit nutty. That's when we know that the butter's ready, that we can add our flour to it. Okay? So here, you can kind of smell a little bit there, and then we'll add our flour. I'll take my whisk and just kind of whisk it around in here. And you'll see that it'll kind of come to get this stuff off the side there. It'll kind of be a big thick glob or kind of pasty, almost a Play-Doh-like substance. And that's okay. You want it to be about like that. Now you can turn the heat down at this point, or you can keep it high, whatever you're comfortable with, but you want to cook your roux a little bit. You want to be able to, it should smell kind of like bread or kind of like chestnuts roasting on an open fire. But as soon as you can kind of smell that nutty smell, you know that the roux is ready. Now, what we used to do in the hotels is we would make a lot of this roux ahead of time. And then we would keep it on the side so that when we needed to thicken sauces, it was readily available instead of having to make it new every single time. So there's a lot of different types of roux. Depending on what you're using, you're going to use a different type of roux. And the different types come from what you're going to use it for. So if you're going to use a very light sauce, like a bechamel, which is a white sauce, then you're going to want a very light roux. The more color the roux has, the darker it's going to make your sauce. So we use a pale roux or a very light roux for our bechamel sauces or our white sauces. If we were doing a velouté sauce or a darker sauce, kind of like a gravy, we would want more of a blonde roux, something that is a little bit darker but not real dark. Now if you were going to make, say, a gumbo in Cajun cuisine, you would want like a milk chocolate roux, something that looks really, really dark, because that really, really dark color actually is imparting a very, very dark flavor to it as well. To make our different types of roux is cooking time. So for our blonde roux, our pale roux, the roux that are a little lighter, we would cook it a little bit less. The darker we wanted it, the more we would cook it. So if we were going to make this into, say, a gumbo, we would cook this for a long time until it's turned really dark brown, a milk chocolate color. But for some of our lighter sauces, a color just about like this, a nice blonde color, is just fine. Now with our beurre meignets, a beurre meignet is basically an uncooked roux. An uncooked roux that you use at the end of cooking instead of at the beginning. So say you had a roux and you made a sauce and all of a sudden it wasn't thick enough. Well, to fix that, you could actually add a beurre meignet. Now, to do this, what I like to do is I like to weigh everything and do it by weight, because it's much more accurate than doing it by volume. 1 cup of flour does not equal 8 ounces of flour, which would be the equivalent. So you want to make sure that you weigh it to be much more accurate, a trick that the bakers use predominantly. So you can find different scales like this. These are good advantages or good tools to use, or you can just buy the regular scales that have the little weights on them. Now with the beurre meunier or the roux, we're going to go equal amounts of flour and butter. So if I use 4 ounces of flour, I'm going to use 4 ounces of butter. In this case, I'm using, for my beurre meunier, 2 ounces of butter and 2 ounces of flour. So we'll put that in here. And this is the fun part. With a beurre meunier, you actually will just mash it up. Now with the roux, we'll melt the butter. With a beurre meunier, it needs to be soft. It needs to be real pasty. If it's not real pasty, kind of like a pie dough filling almost, if it's not real pasty, it doesn't work as well. So you want it to be soft when you do your beurre meunier. Now once it gets to a consistency about like this, where all the flour's kind of been eaten up in there, and it's all real flour buttery, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want for a beurre meunier. Now we can just add a little bit at the end of our sauces to finish them up. So remember this, when you're making roux and your beurre meunier to thicken your sauces, they impart great flavor, great textures, as long as they're made right.